This clay tablet was found inside a kiln, an oven, in the ruins of an ancient city. It contains a letter from a terrified king begging for help. He says his ships are gone. He says the enemy is at the gates. But the letter was never sent. The scribe put it in the oven to dry, and he never came back to get it. Because the fire that baked this clay wasn't the heat of the oven. It was the heat of the palace burning down around him. The city of Ugarit was wiped off the map before the ink could even dry. And Ugarit wasn't alone. In the year 1177 BC, the world was ending. The Egyptians, the Hittites, the Greeks, the superpowers of the ancient world all collapsed in a single lifetime. They were erased by an unknown army that came from the sea, an army that burned every city from Greece to Egypt and then vanished without a trace. We don't know their names. We don't know where they came from. We just call them the Sea Peoples. Welcome to Origin Archive. Today, we are solving the world's first apocalypse. Act 1. The first global economy. Before we can understand the death of this world, we have to understand just how alive it was. There is a misconception that the ancient world was primitive, that everyone lived in mud huts and never traveled more than 10 miles from their village. That is completely wrong. The late Bronze Age, around 1200 BC, was eerily similar to today. It was Globalism 1.0. If you looked at a map of the Mediterranean back then, you wouldn't see isolated tribes, you would see superpowers. In the south, Egypt. In the north, the Hittites. In the east, Babylon. And in the west, the Mycenaean Greeks. These nations weren't just neighbors, they were business partners. Archaeologists have found letters between the Pharaoh of Egypt and the king of the Hittites where they call each other brother. They sent gifts, they had treaties. But the glue holding this entire world together was metal, specifically bronze. To make bronze, you need copper and tin. Copper was easy to find, but tin was the oil of the ancient world. It was rare, precious, and came from mines thousands of miles away in Afghanistan. This created a massive, fragile supply chain. The Mycenaeans needed Hittite protection to get Babylonian tin to mix with Cypriot copper. Everyone relied on everyone else. It was a just-in-time delivery system 3,000 years before Amazon. It meant the standard of living was higher than it had ever been, but it also meant the system had a fatal flaw. Because everything was connected, a failure in one place wouldn't just stay there, it would ripple. If the tin stopped flowing, the weapons stopped being made. If the grain from Egypt stopped, the Hittites starved. They had built a magnificent, complex machine, but they didn't realize that the more complex a system becomes, the easier it is to break. And around 1177 BC, the machine started to jam. Act 2. The perfect storm. Apocalypses are rarely simple. They are a domino effect. The first domino was the sky. Recent pollen samples taken from ancient lakes in Syria tell a terrifying story. Around 1200 BC, the region was hit by a mega drought. This wasn't just a dry summer, this was a climate shift that lasted for decades. In a world that runs on agriculture, no rain means no food, and no food means instability. We have found letters from the Hittite king demanding urgent grain shipments from Egypt, saying literally, it is a matter of life or death. The superpowers were starving, the people were hungry, and when people are hungry, they stop trusting their king. They start looking for a way out. But nature wasn't done yet. Geologists have found evidence that during this exact same window, the Mediterranean was hit by an earthquake storm, a sequence where one massive quake triggers another, unzipping the earth like a zipper over a period of years. Imagine the scene. The crops have failed for 10 years, your children are hungry, the trade ships have stopped coming, and then the ground beneath your feet shakes the city walls into rubble. The protective shell of civilization was cracked, the armies were weakened, the world was a house of cards waiting for a breeze. Instead of a breeze, they got a hurricane. Act 3. The Nine Bows. It started with rumors from the coast, fishermen reporting massive fleets of strange ships on the horizon. Then the reports turned into silence. Cities along the coast simply went dark. In Egypt, Pharaoh Ramses III recorded their arrival. He didn't call them the Sea Peoples, he called them the Nine Bows. The reliefs carved into the stone show a terrifying enemy: horned helmets, feathered headdresses, long slashing swords. But the most chilling detail isn't their weapons, it's what was behind them. The Egyptian carvings showed that these warriors didn't just come with ships, they came with ox carts. They brought their wives, they brought their children, they brought their household pots and pans. This wasn't a raiding party, it was a migration. Current theories suggest the Sea Peoples were refugees, perhaps from Sicily or Sardinia, who had been displaced by the same droughts and chaos. They were fleeing their own apocalypse, and they were willing to burn through anyone who stood in their way to find a new home. And they were unstoppable. The Hittite Empire, a civilization that had stood for 500 years, vanished. Their capital, Hattusa, was burned to ash. The city of Troy, destroyed. The Mycenaeans in Greece, leveled. The oven letter from the start of this video tells us the king of Ugarit had sent his army away to help his allies. He left his own gate open. When the Sea Peoples arrived, there was no one left to defend the city. They cut through the region like a scythe. Finally, they reached the gates of Egypt. Ramses III mobilized every soldier he had. He lured the Sea Peoples' fleet into the Nile Delta, trapping them against the shore. The water turned red. Egypt won the battle, but the victory was hollow. The cost of the war drained the Egyptian treasury. The trade partners Egypt relied on were all dead. The supply chain was broken. Ramses III saved Egypt from invasion, but he couldn't save it from the collapse. Act 4. The Great Silence. The aftermath wasn't just physical destruction, it was silence. When the palaces burned, the bureaucrats who ran the complex trade networks died with them, and almost overnight, the lights went out. In Greece, the loss was total. The Mycenaeans had a writing system called Linear B. They used it to track taxes, armies, and history. After the collapse, Linear B vanished. The Greeks didn't just forget their history, they forgot how to read. For the next 400 years, there are no written records. The population plummeted by 75%. People stopped building with stone and went back to wood. The great stories of the time, the Trojan War, the Odyssey, couldn't be written down. They had to be memorized, passed down in song in the dark, waiting for the alphabet to be reinvented centuries later. The complexity trap had snapped shut. The network was so tight that when the Sea Peoples cut the main cables, the whole suspension bridge fell into the ocean. Conclusion: the ruins of tomorrow. The collapse of the Bronze Age is a ghost story, but it's not about the past, it's about the arrogance of the present. We look at the ruins of Ugarit and we feel safe. We think, we have the internet, we have satellites, we are too big to fail. But that is exactly what the king of Ugarit thought. He had a global economy, he had treaties, he had a standing army. And yet his scribe died screaming in a burning room, baking a letter for a rescue ship that didn't exist. The scribe didn't know he was living in the last days of his civilization. He just thought he was having a bad year. The lesson of the sea peoples isn't that systems break, it's that they break while you are still using them. Civilization isn't a permanent structure made of stone, it is a fragile agreement, and history shows us that the agreement can be cancelled without notice. This is Origin Archive. If you want to understand the past before it becomes our future, make sure you are subscribed. See you in the ruins.